who's joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Demystifying Your Journey to Accreditation. The webinar is being recorded and I will send a copy of the recording out later in the week. We do have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where Louise and I will hope to answer your questions. Any that we can't get to, we will do offline. If you'd like to submit a question, please can you use the Q&A box in order to put those questions to us rather than the chat. As you can see, microphones won't be enabled during the webinar, so it's really best to put the questions to the Q&A. So I'm going to hand over to Louise Sanders, who's our Head of Development and Scheme Integrity, and she will present the webinar. She'll give you a good overview of how to get on the journey to accreditation.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Laura, and hello and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for joining us for this hour's webinar where we'll take you through some more of the detail in your journey for accreditation and add some more detail following the one that we did a couple of weeks ago. So my name's Louise Sanders. I'm the Head of Development and Scheme Integrity here at UKAS. So we work with organisations to develop and establish accreditation in areas where it's not yet implemented, not yet present. So as you can imagine, it's a very interesting, busy and diverse area to work in. And we also look after scheme integrity. So that's looking at the schemes that are used primarily in certification and inspection to make sure that they meet requirements and they're fit for purpose and fill the market need as well. As Laura said, throughout the session, we'll have a Q&A function open. So if you have any comments or queries, please do feel free to raise them in that Q&A box, and we'll answer those, or as many of them as we can, at the end of this session. Okay, so I'm going to move on now and talk about the processes that we're going to cover in today's webinar. So this webinar is a part of a series that we repeat regularly throughout the year. The first one in this series ran 2 weeks ago, and that webinar aimed to introduce the concept and the value of accreditation. A third session will run in the new year. And that one will go into much more detail about the role of the UKAS assessment managers, so specifically around those people who become your focal point for your accreditation at UKAS, and they will answer any queries, any technical problems, anything to do with your accreditation. So that will run in the new year for you. Okay, just clicking through. And this webinar is going to give you a little bit more information about some of the things that we're going to talk about. So primarily we're going to talk about, is accreditation right for you? Will it meet what you require with your business within your sector? And also what kind of accreditation you might need. So accreditation comes in lots of different packages. So which one is the right one for your business? Remembering, of course, that there is often more than one option. We're going to think about, is your business ready to proceed with accreditation? We're going to talk about the application process, then run through the pre-assessment, the initial assessment, and the assessment approach. We're going to talk a little bit about assessment findings, how you maintain your accreditation, what are the costs involved with accreditation, and what happens next. But first of all, before you apply, it's important to consider whether accreditation is the correct course of action for your business. Is it what the sector is looking for? Is it a regulatory requirement, government requiring it? And of course, what kind of accreditation will suit you the best? It's worth recapping on the benefits here. So the benefits that accreditation can provide. And these include highlighting gaps or weaknesses in operational capability and providing an opportunity for improved organisational efficiency and outputs. Accreditation provides independent assurance of technical competence and can therefore set you apart from your competition. The assessment process that accompanies accreditation can also help to assess, to identify, and to then reduce and manage risks. And then the global recognition provided by accreditation increases international acceptance for imports and exports. And because of the mutual recognition agreements and arrangements that we have, whether that's with the IAF, through ILAC, or even continuing with the EA, having UKAS accreditation can aid in the removal of technical barriers and trade barriers involved with international trade. Accreditation creates a confidence in industry supply chains and is often specified by public and private sector organisations as a prerequisite for acceptance. Examples of mandatory accreditation activities include in forensics in the UK. There is a need for forensic service providers to be accredited for 17020, the inspection body standard, or ISO 17025, the testing laboratory. And that will depend on the intended technical activity. And then these are also reviewed against the Forensic Science Regulators Statutory Code of Practice. Another example is the Control of Asbestos Regulations 2012, and this talks about accreditation being required for 17025. And that's reviewed against an approved code of practice and guidance. And then there's also screening activities for healthcare, such as infectious diseases in pregnancy, which must be accredited as part of governance requirements. Accreditation provides confidence to employees, to customers, and stakeholders of a commitment to quality and service improvement. Accreditation supports the generation of new business, potentially providing expanded access to new markets and new regions. UKAS surveys our customers each year to gain a better understanding and an up-to-date understanding of how commercial benefits of accreditation are perceived. The stats on the right-hand side of the slide feature the results from this year's survey. UKAS provides accreditation for organisations providing a range of services as illustrated on this slide. And this is what I meant by choosing which type of accreditation is the best fit for any organisation and any activity. You can see there's a vast number of different accreditation types, and selecting which one is the most suitable is often quite a complicated process. As well as that, it's important to establish whether accreditation is applicable to your business and the sector that you operate within. UKAS accreditation is granted to organisations that have demonstrated that they fully meet the requirements of relevant national and international conformity assessment standards. If you're a testing or a calibration or a medical laboratory, or you provide certification, inspection, or validation and verification services, then accreditation is likely to be relevant. Not necessarily essential, but definitely relevant to you. Accreditation is also applicable in a number of healthcare areas, such as physiological and imaging services, medical physics and clinical engineering, biobanking, and proficiency testing. And then finally for this slide, accreditation is applicable to producers of reference materials in a number of different sectors. So, purchasing the right standard. One of the first things you would need to do when you've decided to take your first steps on your journey to accreditation is to purchase the standard that's relevant to your activity. Standards may be purchased from the BSI websites in the UK or from ISO as well. Generally and directly, you can get them from ISO or from BSI. And then some standards, particularly some of the healthcare standards, such as the IQIP standard, are available, publicly available and freely online to download. So different options for different standards that you would need to look at. Accreditation is granted against a specific standard. A conformity assessment body can be accredited to a number of standards for various activities, depending, of course, on what they do. Standards are formulated by groups of experts. They might be British, European, or globally recognised standards. And UKAS members of staff sit on a number of these groups and represent the interests of the UK and accreditation in ensuring that those standards remain fit for purpose and actually cover all of the activities that are required. Standards outline the requirements that must be met by organisations for them to succeed and to deliver their services safely and effectively. Standards define best practice in many areas and come in a number of different formats. During these early stages, UKAS will work with you to establish if your business is ready for accreditation, and if it's not, what options are available to prepare for with you. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this work will also be on deciding the best fit standard for you at this time and for your activities. So resources. UKAS provides you with various resource materials to determine whether your business is ready to apply for accreditation. Before you begin your journey, there are a few things that we recommend that you do. These include making sure you're really familiar with the standard that has been selected and that you are meeting the requirements set by that standard. Generally, people do a gap analysis and make sure that clause by clause that they have something in place that will meet those requirements, and that's certainly a very good idea. Equally, making sure you are familiar with any supporting publications associated with the standard is also important. One of the things you can do to ensure this is to subscribe to the UKAS monthly publications newsletter. This provides essential information about new publications, withdrawn or amended publications, and documents that are inviting consultations. The ISO 17025 Readiness Assessment Tool has been developed especially for organisations considering application of that standard. And now this is a free online tool available on the UKAS website, and that will help testing or calibration laboratories considering that form of accreditation to identify any gaps in the requirements of standard and their current operating status. And then we have our UKAS Training Academy. They offer a huge range of courses relevant to all accreditation standards in order to help organisations prepare for accreditation assessments, to enhance knowledge of the standard and awareness of those standards for quality professionals in all sectors. And a full list of available training courses, including in-person or virtual or on-site, delivered to you in your own premises, and our e-learning options are available on our UKAS website. Moving on. To help with your journey, you should identify the relevant supporting UKAS publications which are required for you to gain accreditation. International publications relevant to your area of accreditation are also available. That might be from the EA, the IAF, or the ILAC websites. And supporting publications and technical content can be found on the UKAS website. As we've said, you can sign up to receive monthly updates. The monthly publication update also includes information on the various standards that might be out for consultation and that might have been withdrawn or amended, as we've said. UKAS has developed a self-assessment tool to help with your organisation to decide whether accreditation is the right choice for you. Currently, we have this available for 17025, and we are now developing self-assessment tools for some of the other standards. So please bear with us as we do that, and hopefully they'll be available in the coming times. You can access the 1702.5 tool via the UKAS website under the Readiness Assessment tool. This tool focuses on the main themes of 1702.5, and there will be many smaller points and specifics that aren't covered, of course. However, if the answer is yes to most of the questions in the assessment, then your organisation is likely to be ready to apply for accreditation itself. To support our accreditation work, we offer public and on-site training courses, as well as providing international advisory services. While training is not a mandatory requirement for gaining accreditation, it can be useful in enhancing the knowledge of some of the more complex areas of the standard, or providing the tools and techniques to fill in the remaining gaps and ensure your systems and processes are developed in line with requirements for accreditation. They also give you the opportunity to discuss any questions or queries you have with our expert trainers and also other delegates on the course who may have similar queries or questions. Our portfolio of courses provides the UK and overseas delegates with knowledge and best practice of accreditation practices and conformity assessment systems. And our expert trainers are committed to providing you with the knowledge and skills to add value to your organisation and confidence to your customers. All UKAS Academy trainers are current or previous senior assessment managers, so there is also the opportunity to ask AMs specific questions in relation to the standard. Training is available in a number of formats, as we've said, whether that's virtual, in person, around the country, or we can even come to you at your organisation's premises. We also have a portfolio of e-learning training that you can complete at your own leisure. So applying for accreditation, we're now going to discuss the process for that as well. This slide describes the application process. You need to complete the correct application forms. This will include details of what to submit, including key policies and procedural documents, proof of your legal status, and this will help to ensure the swift processing of your application. The supporting material that we require includes an application form which is specific to each sector, which we can direct you to. Some of your management system documentation, this might be your quality manual, for example. The legal status of your organisation and evidence of that. A signed copy of the UKAS agreement and payment of the application fee. If your organisation is outside the UK, then please do contact us at sales@ukas.com in the first instance, and we'll assist you before you go and complete any of the forms. The application is then reviewed when we've got all of those forms together. And this is for us to ensure that we have the ability, that we have the competency, and we have available personnel to complete all of the decisions, the assessments, and the full process with you. The review will also include our checks that we can do it in a manner that is going to fit with your timelines. So that is one of the key questions we would ask is, when do you need this accreditation to be in place by? Quite often there might be a regulatory requirement that a certain activity is accredited by a certain date. So we would discuss that with you and try to ensure that we can meet those requirements with you and discuss how best to do that. Doing that, we now go on to the pre-assessment. So as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the pre-assessment is a very important part of the process. It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended. It allows you to meet your lead assessor or your assessment manager, and for them to get to know you and you to get to know them. It familiarises your team with the assessment process, so gives you a kind of dummy run of this is the assessment, these are the kind of questions we're going to ask, this is the kind of things we're going to be looking at, just to ensure that everybody is familiar and comfortable with the process. It gives you the process of being able to ask any questions that you have. And that might be around accreditation in general, it might be about any of the requirements, or it might be around the initial assessment and what that will look like and what will happen on that as well. Also, of course, it provides an impartial external perspective of your processes and procedures. And we quite often see that people are so close to their own systems that they don't always see the wood for the trees, to mention the old adage there. So sometimes just having those fresh set of eyes to ask some different questions can be really helpful for organisations. And of course, one of the main processes, the main outcomes for this is to identify if there are any problems, any weaknesses within your systems, anything that could possibly lead to being a non-conformity at an initial assessment. So it's there to prepare you, to help you to make sure that you're ready before we move on to the initial assessment itself. During those pre-assessments, there is a list here of some of the things that we commonly find. I think common is probably doing it at a disadvantage. I would say we see this on the absolute vast majority of the times. So we quite often find that some of the requirements might have been misunderstood, whether that's in a standard or in a sector scheme. So that might be down to interpretation for a certain activity or in a certain area. So we would discuss that with organisations. May well be that some of the requirements of the standard haven't been met yet. So perhaps there's some more work to do, and we would discuss that with organisations. It might be that those requirements have been incorrectly determined. So you've perhaps gone off on a tangent and perhaps don't need to be working so hard in a certain area. So we can help you to ensure that everything you're doing is absolutely the best use of your time and your resource. We've mentioned those mandatory documents, whether they're ILAC, IAF, or EA. So we need to make sure that if there are any mandatory documents that are relevant to your activities, that they have been implemented and are understood. We quite often see that processes, policies, procedures have all been written and they're beautifully ready, sat there in a manual, but they haven't actually been implemented yet. So accreditation is very much about what you're doing, not what you're going to be doing. So we need to see that those activities have actually been implemented. We have two findings at the bottom, which are really, really common. Sometimes we find that what actually is happening isn't quite what's said in the documents or the policy or procedure that accompanies it. That might be because the policy is not right, or it was written before a system was developed, and actually it needs to be revisited. And then the last one, which I tend to try and sell as a positive finding, and this is that you're doing a really good job and the activity that is being performed is great, but actually it's not reflected in the policy or the evidence or the procedures that are associated with that procedure. So that's the positive one. You're doing everything right. You just need to make sure that the document itself reflects that excellent process. So common assessment standards, conformity assessment standards, you will see that all of our standards have certain areas. So they will include general requirements, so things that all organisations have to do and be. Structural requirements, so that's what you need to be. For example, you need to be a legal entity, you need to have top management and top management commitment, all of those things. Then we can move on to resource requirements. So that's what you need to have. So things like personnel, equipment, facilities, etc. Then we move to process requirements. So those are what you need to do. So that might be your methods, your schemes, your protocols, for example. And then for all organisations as well, you have to have management system requirements. So that's when your document controls, your records control, your non-conformities and corrective actions, your improvements, excuse me, your internal audit program, and your management review processes come into account. So now we'll examine what takes place on an initial assessment. So this will happen once a successful pre-assessment has taken place, at a time that is discussed and agreed with yourselves and with us. When you're ready, we will be with you and plan your initial assessment. So what's involved in an initial assessment? We always have an opening meeting to introduce ourselves and yourselves, to introduce yourselves to us as well, and to agree what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, timings, if there's interviews that are required with different people, what time might they be available? Examples, for example. The assessment will always involve detailed review of records, your systems and your processes, and of absolutely your overall competency of the overall competence of the organisation, as well as individual members of staff. We tend to do a lot of interviews, so we'll talk to lots of different people, whether that's staff, whether that's managers, and we'll always witness key activities. We always have a final meeting to give you a summary of where we've been and what we did, what we found, and to give you a summary, a conclusion of how the assessment's gone. UKAS will always provide a full report shortly after the assessment, and this will detail any findings, so that's any areas of non-conformity, and including the agreed improvement actions that have been agreed. And you'll be asked to advise us and agree with us how you're going to address any non-conformities. So there are various ways in which an assessment can be delivered. The assessment approach will be considered against the delivery. So we'll discuss this with you and decide the best way to perform an assessment. We always, before the pandemic, we did very much, the majority of our assessments were face-to-face on site with you. And then, of course, when COVID happened, we had to switch very quickly to doing remote assessments. So we have two different ways of assessing, and we will determine the best assessment approach, and we will use a risk-based approach for that. So if we feel that we need to be with you, we will, but if there's a way that we can do it remotely, that we can do that as well. We do tend to blend them now, so we might do some elements face-to-face and we might do other elements remotely. And we also have a look at lots of documentation. So we might ask you to submit that so that we can review that. And all of this is to make sure that we get sufficient information on your activities, but to make sure that the assessment is efficient and effective as possible, and in terms that we can ensure that we meet all of our requirements. The need for assessors to see your customers' work environments and the availability of any ICT are always significant aspects that need to be considered if we're thinking about doing some element of your assessment remotely. So we'll discuss that with you, ask you what you have available, what's possible, and see if there's any way that we can do that with you. So assessment findings, I mentioned that if we find any gaps or any weaknesses during that initial assessment, any areas of non-conformity, then we would raise what we call an improvement action finding. So the team will identify both positive and negative findings, with the negative findings referred to as non-conformities or improvement actions. A non-conformity is the failure to meet one or more requirements outlined within normative requirements of the standard. And we call these mandatory improvement actions, so you have to address them in order to meet the requirements of the standard. We, as the assessment teams, will put those improvement actions as we've recorded them and agreed with you on site or during the assessment with you. We'll place those then onto our UKAS assessment portal, where it's not possible to complete online an offline improvement action report. An IAR is provided and would be uploaded into our portal shortly after the assessment. Then yourselves, you would be required to upload to the UKAS assessment portal all the details of the outcome of your root cause analysis. So why did a certain thing happen? Why was something missing? Why hadn't something actually perhaps worked as you had imagined it would? And then you also need to determine the extent of that non-conformity, the actions that you've taken to resolve it, and the evidence that you're supplying to demonstrate that. The portal submission, together with supporting evidence of actions, needs to be completed within a specified timeframe. For an initial assessment, that's 12 weeks. And then once you're accredited, it tends to be 4 weeks or so. UKAS then review the submitted evidence and the supporting evidence to determine if you've been actually addressed and cleared them in a satisfactory manner. And we're going to give you some feedback, of course, to let you know which ones have been cleared. And if we require any further evidence, then we'll request that from you as well. And that's done within 4 weeks of receipt into UKAS. The assessment is conducted, and then there's a requirement that there's also an independent decision made by a person or a committee. Now, these people, and generally it's a person actually, will review the report and confirm whether the recommendation for accreditation in that report is appropriate, and what accreditation can be awarded. We also look here for decision makers to check that we followed our processes. So did we look at everything we needed to? Have we documented it, and have we completed a full and appropriate and a sufficiently detailed assessment to give that full decision and picture on as to whether the activities are able to be accredited? The decision process is split into 2 stages. So first of all, we have a provisional decision, and then it's followed by a final decision process. So talking a little bit more about that decision-making process, as we've mentioned, it's a 2-stage decision. The first stage is completed, so this is the provisional decision, is completed when the head off assessment and technical assessments have been completed. And then the final second process is the final decision. And this is when all of your improvement actions have also been cleared. So that's the full picture. We've done all of the assessments, you've cleared any non-conformities, and we present that to the decision makers to make a decision and to hopefully then to be able to grant accreditation. The output of that decision, the good day, is when you get confirmation that accreditation has been granted. You are then given an e-certificate, a schedule of accreditation, and on that is detailed what your scope of accreditation includes. We also then send you a set of symbols for your accreditation, and then you can use this in accordance with your fine rules. The rules for using your symbols, particularly the UKAS symbols that you can see bottom right here, are very detailed and very specific. The reason for that is we are licensed to use our UKAS symbol by government. And of course, you can see there that we have a crown on the symbol. So we have to be very careful with how that crown is used and what it is inferring, and how it's used and where it's used. So accreditation symbols can be used on your certificates and your reports that you issue, quotations or estimates for accredited work, corporate stationery, letterheads, compliment slips, etc. You can pop them in frames and put them on the walls. You can use them in your exhibitions and on websites, as long as it's all in connection to accredited work. Now, because of the use of the crown, you're prohibited from using them on vehicles. You can't put the UKAS symbol on a building or on a flag. You can't put it on goods or products or primary packaging there. We encourage you to use the national accreditation symbols for all of your promotional purposes, providing the conditions of the use of those symbols are met. Now, you can find more information about that on our website, and I would really encourage you to use that and make sure that you are meeting those requirements. And then we have the ILAC and the IAF symbols on this slide as well. So if you trade overseas, you can also use those marks to signal global acceptance. Your accreditation. So we have a number of brochures. UKAS has provided a variety of materials to promote and benefit the use of accredited services. They can be downloaded from our website. You can distribute them. You can hyperlink to them. And that can be there to support any quotations or documentations, direct marketing that you might be having with your customers as well. We also have a set of promotional videos hosted on our UKAS YouTube channel. So you can also link to those or embed them within your website. We have an World Accreditation Day, which is held each year on the 9th of June. That's organised by ILAC and IAF. And is promoted by standards, metrology, conformity assessment communities. And you're encouraged to use your material for that day, and to use our material just to promote your accredited status to your customers and your stakeholders. And so you can always get that information from our website. So moving on now, we're going to talk a little bit about what happens after you are granted accreditation. So each year we will need to come and visit you, and what we do, call it a surveillance assessment in order for your accreditation to be maintained. And just to take you through the process, we've already covered the application here. We've covered the pre-assessment and the contract review, which is our review of your application, the initial assessment. So this part is around the right-hand side of this slide, which is surveillance. So once you have your accreditation granted, then each year we will do what we call a surveillance activity, see how you're getting on, see how your activities remain implemented, perhaps improving, perhaps simplifying any changes that you make, and we will assess you each year, including technical activities, or whether you're performing audits or test methods. We will observe those as well. And then in the 4th year of that cycle, we do what we call a reassessment, and that's with the aim of renewing your accreditation. So at the end of a successful reassessment, we go through the same decision process as we do for the initial, and we check everything is in place. And an independent person checks that we have covered everything, and your accreditation is duly renewed. So things that you can do to help us. If you have any changes, so if your significant members of staff leave or change, and you change the structure or the way that your organisation is run, if you move buildings, if you have a change in ownership, of course, we will need to know all of that. You will need to maintain your technical competency for all of the areas that we accredit you for. You need to keep up to date with any regulatory changes in your sector. There's the subscriptions that you can do to update to our UKAS publications and our technical bulletins. Please do use our website as a source of reference material and help. There's a huge amount of information there for you to use. Please let us know if you're going to do any relocations. We do need to make sure that we understand that so that we can ensure that your accreditation remains in place. And you also must absolutely keep up to date with your internal audit regime. This is your internal process, your internal evaluation on whether you are still performing what you need to do, whether you're competent, whether your processes meet requirements, whether they're implemented, whether they're understood. So an extremely important part of your activities are your internal audits. You need to make sure that you have effective and ongoing document control so that out of date or superseded documents aren't being used incorrectly. And of course, you need to retain quality records and technical records throughout the period between assessments so that we can look back and see how you were working, and also so that you have that traceability and assurance for your own activities, that you know who did what, when and where, and you've got the records to demonstrate that. To costs then. All assessment fees are effort related, so they are depending on the complexity and the size of the scope for which accreditation is being sought. These fees include not just the time that the assessment team spend with you on site or remotely, but also our office time. So the time it takes us to review all of your documentation, to write reports, to have all of that in place. And a list of our current fees can be found in the UKAS standard terms of business, which is available on our website. So if we need to be with you for 2 days, we will charge you and invoice you for 2 days of our time. And it literally is whatever we need to assess you in terms of people and the days that they'll be with you, and that's how we calculate the fees. And the following slide provides an indication of costs with some examples for you to see. So as we said, it relates to your scope. So typically the larger or the more complex your scope, the more assessment time, because the more staff we will need to have with us to assess you, and they're likely to need to be with you for longer because there's more to see. We complete an assessment annually, as we've said, so that's your surveillance activity. Different assessment types. So we've talked about pre-assessments, we've talked about initial surveillances and reassessments. And then we have a 4-year accreditation cycle. So once you're accredited, it's 3 surveillances and then 1 reassessment visit as well. So we have a scenario here just to go through some typical costs. Now this is for a small testing laboratory. They might be doing soil analysis we have here. So there's an application fee to be paid. Pre-assessment costs are there based on the amount of days that we would be with you. So we can see there that that's 3.5 days, between 3.5 and 5.5 days. Initial being between £7,000 and perhaps £11,000, and then an annual assessment of between £4,000 and £6,000, with some added effort required for reassessment, because we need to look at everything and make sure that everything has been covered appropriate. And those costs are exclusive of VAT. So please do get in touch with us if there's anything you'd like to discuss around starting your journey and becoming accredited, or if you'd like to discuss the options with us, then please do let us know. So we have different departments for inquiries. If you bring one and that you needed the other one, it's fine. We'll put you in touch with the right people. So we have our general accreditation and technical inquiry group. We have the group to use or if you're starting and considering applying for accreditation, or if you'd like to attend a UKAS training course, there's another group there as well. Please do contact us. We're more than willing to help and answer any questions and put you in touch with the right people to discuss that with you as well. So any questions at all? So Laura, have we got any questions?
Yeah. Hi there. Yeah. So we've got a few questions in. Somebody's asked around timelines. Someone said, when a UKAS visit is arranged, can we create a timeline for how the visit will go?
Yes, absolutely. So what we usually do is discuss that with you. So we book a visit anywhere between perhaps 3 and 5 months in advance, although sometimes now we are actually booking dates as we leave the last visit. So we're booking 12 months ahead just so that we can make sure that that visit goes. But when we're arranging the visit, that's very much a really important part is who do we need to talk to and who will you have available? And if they're only available in the morning or in an afternoon, whatever that looks like, then that's something absolutely to discuss with your assessment manager to make sure that we work around you, we work around any vital activities that you need to get done as well, so that we're not going to impinge on your business activities during that day. So yes, that's a really important part. Absolutely.
Someone here's asked quite an interesting question about how does the assessment process account for and be sensitive about classified government or commercially sensitive information?
Okay. We are asked that question an awful lot. So all of our staff, our technical assessors, our assessment managers all sign a code of conduct, which ensures that everything that we discuss remains confidential between ourselves and would not be shared with anybody else. We always say you can talk about your assessment and what happens and what we see with whoever you like, but we will not. So we wouldn't even discuss that we've assessed you. That's up to you to describe. We do need to see information. So, of course, if it's particularly sensitive or if it's patient names, we get that a lot, then of course you can redact. But as long as it's traceable, as long as we can work and follow a process and see how your systems work, that's what we're there to do, to make sure that everything is working as you have planned and that it meets the requirements of the standard. So discuss it if you have any particular queries or any concerns about us not seeing anything specific. Then please do discuss that with your assessment managers, who will either allay your fears or say, we'll come to an agreement, say, okay, we won't see that, but we'll need to see this. Sometimes we see template documents, or perhaps you can prepare us a dummy one, and we can do it that way as well. But the key is to discuss it with your assessment manager prior to the assessment so that a suitable alternative or path around it can be found.
Thank you. And we've got one final question, so only one more question. So if anyone does have anything they want to ask, please pop that in the Q&A. This person said that they work for a company who provides air quality testing, and what they want to know is, can they apply for accreditation for air quality sampling the process and the analysis process separately?
Yes, it's a short answer to that. Yes, you absolutely can. So we do accredit sampling as a standalone activity, so that's absolutely fine. The proviso is that it would be followed by accredited testing. So if you want to do one or the other or both together, it's absolutely fine. And I would just say, give us a call and let's talk it through with you exactly what you need and when you need it and what that looks like. Whether it's testing that is novel and hasn't been done before, whether it's sampling that hasn't been done before as well. There are a number of areas at the minute which we're aware of, particularly around air testing, sampling and testing. So I do wonder if it's one of those. So I'd be interested to hear from you if you'd like to discuss that.
Okay, lovely. And we don't have any further questions that have come through. So I can only assume that Louise has done a really good job of running through it. Oh, no, apologies. We have some coming through now. So
Typing quickly.
yeah, that's good. Somebody's asked, do assessment managers have a vetting status to review forensic information?
Absolutely. So any of our forensic staff are all cleared. We have level 3 vetting. We have one of the forces performs that for us, and we have an agreement. So all staff who would be on site with you and anyone who would be looking at any confidential or any sensitive records or information will have been vetted. Yes, absolutely.
Right. And that is it now, I think, for the questions that have come through. If anyone thinks of a question that they would like to send through, please can you forward that to communications@ukas.com, which my team will deal with, and we will certainly be able to forward whatever questions come through to the right department and make sure that they get dealt with. Other than that, thank you very much, Louise, for giving us such a comprehensive run through of the whole process this afternoon.
Yeah.
And also thank you to everybody who has joined us this afternoon. Someone else has literally just asked, can we have a link for previous webinar and forthcoming webinars? Yes, I will send that to you on the email with the recording, so you can sign up for other ones and view previous recordings. So yeah, thank you very much, Louise. I will
Pleasure.
close the webinar at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.